Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming, the pint-sized bundle of terror. Youhu! Youhu is here to torment enemies and players alike in Wuthering Waves. And before you skip her, you may want to watch this video to see if Youhu might actually be useful for your account. Youhu is actually the first new 4-star character since Wuthering Waves' release, and Youhu's Youhuing around, while seemingly unwieldy at first, actually ended up surprising me, deserving a very mild but noticeable woohoo. Get ready for Youhu to Youhu her way to undo her team's boo-boos and boo-hoos with a team that's cuckoo. Also, quick note, this video was filmed on the media server, so thank you Kuro Games for the opportunity. There may be changes with the official release. We'll go through her kit, her echoes and stats, teams, sequences, a showcase, and finally my opinion on Youhuing. Youhu is an ice element healer that has some comical RNG in her kit with a focus on buffing coordinated attack damage. Youhu is currently particularly valuable given the general lack of healers in the game, although admittingly that problem was slightly remedied by those who pulled for Shorekeeper. So what sets Youhu apart from the other 3 healers? Is it incredible damage? No, definitely not. Is it incredibly low field time? Yeah, she's not going to compete with Verena's 2-second field time. Is it universal buffs? Nope, because her outro skill just provides 100% damage amplified to coordinated attacks. Frankly, her kit is extremely complicated for what it actually ends up being in practice. Let's look at some parts of her kit. Her basic attacks are very stubby and frankly not very good, but they do generate her bottom forte bar, with the full 4-part hit combo generating 1 full forte bar. Once her bottom forte bar is full, she can perform a hold attack to randomly generate 1 out of 4 artifacts. Then Youhu can appraise the value of these artifacts by smashing them over her enemy's skulls. Smashing said artifact over an enemy's skull has the following effects. The Chime artifact reduces the enemy's vibration strength, the Ru Yi artifact deals a bit more damage, and the Mask artifact provides a tiny bit of pulling power. And finally, the Turbo Swirly, aka the Ding artifact, helps break the enemy's stance. Frankly, out of these, I think I've noticed the Turbo Swirly potentially doing something, as some boss enemies seem to be a bit easier to stagger. Although I have to be 100% honest, I'm not entirely sure if this is because of the Turbo Swirly, or if it's just because I was hitting the enemy really hard. Anyway, using any of these artifacts more importantly than the aforementioned effects will heal your party based on Youhu's attack stat, and they are useful for generating 10 Concerto each. Youhu has many ways to generate these artifacts. As mentioned, her full normal attack string will fill up her bottom forte bar. Simply holding the normal attack button will quickly and passively increase her forte bar, where again you can perform a heavy attack right after to gain a random artifact. Her resonance skill not only heals the party, it also generates a random artifact. And her dodge counter, which is arguably the most important, also provides her with a random artifact. And finally, her ultimate actually allows her to select an artifact. As you can see, pretty much anything she does will generate one of these artifacts eventually. As Youhu uses her artifacts, they then begin to populate a second forte resource called Auspice. Actually, is it Auspice or Auspice? Alright, it's Auspice. So once Auspice has 4 used artifacts, Youhu can perform a heavy attack to consume these 4 artifacts to then perform Poetic Essence, where she channels her Looney Tunes power to start beating and bonking her enemies, which somehow also heals your party. Poetic Essence deals a tiny bit of damage and more importantly, generates 20 Concerto. You also get some buffs to Poetic Essence, with it doing a bit more damage or healing more depending on how many matching artifacts you pulled. Unfortunately, due to the random nature of this, I personally don't find matching her artifacts to be worth doing at all. So yeah, that's basically her entire kit. Generate artifacts, get 100 Concerto in order to use our Astro skill in order to provide 100% coordinated attack damage amplified to the next character for 28 seconds. Yeah, you heard that right. Not only does this buff last for a whopping 28 seconds, it also doesn't go away if the character swaps off. So this means that a coordinated attacker like Yinlin can grab this buff and not lose this buff once she switches to Xiangli Yao. Speaking of coordinated attackers like Yinlin, there are currently 3 primary benefactors for Youhu's outro skill: Yinlin, Mortefi, and Sequence 6 Calcaro. Okay, I'm just joking about Calcaro. Obviously, the third character is Zhezhi. These characters happen to not only be quite strong, a sizable portion of their damage output counts as coordinated attack damage. As we can see, Yinlin's lightning strikes are doing 3066 damage on crit, but with Youhu's outro buff, Yinlin is now doing 6132 damage with her lightning coordinated attacks. As expected for it to, well, double Yinlin's damage. Now, the next question you probably have is, what's the best way to build Concerto? And, well, unfortunately, this is where things, well, get a bit unfortunate, especially for Youhu's first rotation. Youhu enjoys using dodge counters to quickly and efficiently generate artifacts and therefore Concerto, as her normal attacks are way too stubby and slow. Let's take a look at one example. Here I use her skill and swap canceled her off. Then I swap her back on time in order to use her artifact and to dodge counter the monkey for another artifact. And with a second dodge counter, I used a third artifact. Then with her liberation, she's actually now at 100 Concerto. But since I never got the Turbo Swirly beforehand, I decided to use the Turbo Swirly in order to potentially stagger the monkey, along with using her Echo before swapping off. Fortunately for her second rotation and beyond, because you'll often intro skill her in, which gives you a free artifact, or you'll have some of your bottom bar full for a faster artifact, or you have her Forte available, or you've swap canceled her on and off a couple of times, her field time will be drastically reduced. Now you'll notice me saying a lot of ors there, and that's intentional, because the second rotation and beyond, well, there's just a lot of things that will change for Youhu. And she doesn't have as much of a static rotation in comparison to, well, for example, the other support characters. For her trace priority, make sure to get her first major talent, which heals the whole party when you smash an artifact. Then level up her skill and forte to increase the healing that she does. I'm personally going to leave everything else at level 1 since Youhu barely does any damage and those other talents only increase her damage. Fortunately, when it comes to building Youhu, it's extremely simple. In 95% plus of scenarios, I recommend the Rejuvenating Glow set. Either the Bellborn Turtle or the Fallacy of No Return work great as the equipped main Echo. Personally, I prefer the Fallacy of No Return, but hey, the Bellborn Turtle is still great. And for the main stat, healing bonus is fine and same with attack percent, but it's not a huge deal if you use literally any stat, since the raw healing provided rarely matters in Wuthering Waves. You either take a trivial amount of damage, which is easily healed off, or you die a terrible death from a single poke from a literal hologram. There are some rare 5% situations where you can consider the 4-piece Moonlit Clouds though, but for general use I recommend the Rejuvenating Glow set. For the main stats, attack percent on both the 3 cost and 1 cost echoes is what I'm going to go with. Youhu's healing scales off attack, so I find attack percent to work just fine to maximize her healing. I also never had any energy issues with her due to the Marcato gauntlets as well as her long 25-second cooldown on her liberation. For substats, it really doesn't matter again unless you're a madman trying to min-max her damage for some reason, but I would say attack percent and energy recharge are nice to have, although far from necessary. The aforementioned budget Rejuvenating Glow setup will suffice for about 95% of the player base who will use her as a support character. Comment down below if you're going to be part of the 5% that plans to try to make her do damage. For her weapons, frankly, given the amount of damage that she does at sequence 0, which is, the only gauntlets worth using in my opinion are the Marcato gauntlets, which speed up her Concerto generation. You can also slap on any gauntlets with attack percent if you want her to heal a bit more and do a tiny bit of more damage, but yeah, Marcato gauntlets are definitely the way to go in my opinion. And look, I gotta be honest, Youhu's sequences are they all just increase her damage, and as mentioned many times by now, her damage is just not impactful. By sequence 6, assuming you've min-maxed her DPS build, she's going to be doing maybe around like 50% more damage than at sequence 0, and she's just not going to hold a candle to top tier DPS threats like Zhezhi. Getting all her sequences does offer a noticeable damage boost, helping enhance the character's overall viability as a healer DPS. So yeah, her sequences exist and should be treated as such, just existing. Now fortunately for Youhu, she works fine on many of the current meta teams. While she doesn't boost the main DPS's damage by as much as other healers, she severely boosts the coordinated attacker's damage. This means that she is functional on 3 of the best teams in the game. For Jian, she can be used to buff Mortefi's damage, as well as to provide Jian with the usual rejuvenating glow buff. She also works just fine on a Zhezhi team, buffing either Zhezhi's or Yinlin's damage. And finally, she's decent on a Shangli Yao team, where she can buff the damage of Yinlin's off-field electro damage. There are some less recommended hipster double healer teams you can try, with, for example, Zhezhi, Youhu, and either Shorekeeper or Verena. But yeah, again, this is for hipsters only that want to try to make a coordinated attacker deal pretty much the entire team's worth of damage. As for other teams, yes, you can use her just fine as a general rejuvenating glow set, but for the other teams, I personally prefer the other healers over Youhu. And one thing I really appreciate about Youhu is how much effort they put into her design. Despite her 4-star rarity, Wuthering Waves really went all out with her animations, with a hilarious cut-in liberation animation, as well as all sorts of additional little details that you typically associate with a higher rarity character. And I'm really glad they're keeping their standards high even for 4-star characters. Now, there are a few additional details about Youhu worth mentioning. If in the future we ever get a coordinated attacker that deals truckloads of damage, well, Youhu's value will rise. Now, I'm not trying to downplay the damage that Zhezhi, Yinlin, and Mortefi do, but they're typically used as off-field DPS characters, playing a more secondary DPS role. Still, this is massive speculation and we shouldn't pull characters just based on that. Besides, she's a 4-star character, and while we don't know if she's going to be added to the standard banner pool, I would guess that she probably will be, eventually. Regardless, she does feel like a nice quality of life healer, in that she's able to spam her heals in the overworld. Because she can quickly and efficiently generate artifacts by simply holding down the basic attack button, this means a steady influx of artifacts while just exploring and doing stuff. Youhu is a perfectly reasonable 4-star healer, all things considered, and she certainly feels like a 4-star healer. Fortunately for her, healers at the moment, at least, are incredibly useful simply for the rejuvenating glow plus echo buffs, and Youhu is perfectly capable of providing these with great efficiency. Overall, if you need another healer on your account, and you are using a team with significant coordinated attack damage, then Youhu is a reasonable character to add to your account. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't talk about Yuanwu, and that's because the amount of coordinated attack damage he does is exactly what you'd expect from a Fedora malating Redditor, which is, well, pretty negligible. And I guess actually being a Fedora malating Redditor was completely unrelated to how much damage a character does with coordinated attacks, but yeah. Anyway, don't forget to upvote this video and to subscribe for more character guides and showcases. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.